Hey there, good evening. Nice to see you. It is time for the Bronx Buzz. This is Bronx Night's program where we talk to reporters, writers, editors, authors, which is what we're going to do in our second segment. People who are writing stuff about our borough, the Bronx, and that way you can get some insight into what they think about and what they're writing about. And we are going to join one of our favorite reporters because she really is doing a great job at the Bronx Times. And so we'll say good evening to Aliya Schneider. Nice to see you, Aliya.
Nice to see you too.
And as I told you off camera, you're just doing a great job. You're a thorough reporter, and we need you so badly in the borough of the Bronx. You really were the one who told us about this Trump links story. Of course, there's been a controversy because the former president has had his name and has owned the golf course over there in Throggs Neck. But apparently that is coming to an end. And there have been a lot of people. And in fact, I will tell you some background. Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. told me he regretted, after he saw the presidency of Donald Trump, that he regretted that he stood and had his picture taken with Trump, etc. Anyway, what's happening over there, and why will the Donald's name be taken off that eventually?
Yeah, so the Bally's Corporation has bought the license to operate that golf course. So it is on public parkland, but the Trump organization had a license to operate Trump links until 2035. And the city has unsuccessfully tried to get the Trump name off of that course and to try to end the lease early. And the Trump organization was not interested in ending the lease. But the Bally's Corporation made an offer that the Trump organization could not reject, apparently. And this is all tied into Bally's attempt to get a casino license. There's a process underway right now where there's going to be a few full casino licenses granted downstate, and Bally's is hoping to get one of those and build a casino resort next to the golf course.
I was going to ask you that. So it's not going to replace the golf course. It's just apparently there's enough available land there that they can now build, as you say, a casino right next to it. In other words, they found that to be empty space that they could use.
Yeah, when I spoke to the chair of Bally's, he told me that they don't plan to interfere with the golf course at all. He feels like the golf course has actually been run well, and they plan to kind of continue things with that.
Mhm.
And they feel like there's enough space to build a casino resort next to it. And I did ask, if you don't get the casino license, what's going to happen? And he
Oh,
said,
that's a great question. Yeah.
yeah, because there's no guarantee. And so he said that they do plan to continue to operate the golf course through at least the end of the lease, and that it's profitable and that there are pros to them for continuing to operate the golf course, even if they don't get the casino license.
Listen,
So
they could probably figure out something else in that spot as necessary. I mean, I don't want to make development choices for them. But one thing I recall, because I've been around a long time, when before the golf course was built and before the Trump organization, got a hold of it, it was, contaminated land. And there had always been questions, number one, about golfers golfing on top that land. And I'm curious to know if any of that dialogue is still out there, or if has it been felt that they really cleaned up that site completely? I mean, I don't play golf, and so I've never played there or anything like that. But it always would be a question for me if you're playing on top of a former toxic site. I don't know.
yeah, I'm not sure the most recent thing on that. I know that's probably something that people have questions about, but I should definitely look into that in
Oh,
terms.
there you go. I gave you a tip instead of you giving me one. That's good. That's a good idea. And this leads to a whole other dialogue about the whole notion of casinos, and because we haven't really granted the licenses yet in New York, and of course, Empire Casino has one up in Yonkers. Um, what is the status of? Do you know what the status, and did they talk about either their optimism or their ideas about what it's going to take to actually, it's almost like the whole cannabis thing is all messed up. That it's going to, figure out how are we going to get our license actually?
Well, Bally's is feeling pretty optimistic, even though there are nearby casinos that are already running, without the full license, but they're allowed to have table games and electronic games, and they have racetracks. But they still feel like they're in a good location. The Bally's location is right in between the two, kind of in the area in Queens and in Yonkers. But when I talked to the chair of Bally's, he said that he feels like it's still a unique location in terms of access to areas outside of New York City, and he seems pretty
Right.
optimistic about
Yeah,
it.
probably right. Right. You listen. It's right at the foot of the Whitestone Bridge on the Bronx side. So you got all of Long Island or Queens can come there, and certainly if you're coming down from the northern, areas in Westchester, you can get right down the Hutch and get on there. I mean, the other thing that is unique about that site, of course, it makes me think about the dialogue over the cricket plans. Is there's a lot of space there. I mean, that's another thing that makes it really attractive. Let's extend the dialogue a little bit because you really wrote two very interesting stories about transportation in that area. Now, just to extend the dialogue to the Throgs Neck ferry stop, I have been there. I've taken that ferry a few times. There are places to park. It's limited, but mass transit is limited. And Bally's it has done something to help that problem. And then, of course, maybe it would extend into their project in the future. Let's just talk about transportation in that area of Throgs Neck and the park over there and Ferry Point Park and everything.
Yeah, so when the ferry landing came to Throgs Neck, people kind of realized that it's a great option for people with a car. But if you don't have a car, it's not very easy to get
That's
there.
right.
Some people, take ride shares there. Some people do bike or take e-scooters there. But really, most people seem to be using their cars, and there's no bus stop or subway stop
Yeah.
really conveniently located there. And so that has been a big issue with this ferry because the city has all this fanfare and people are like, well, there isn't really a way for a lot of people to get here. And it's
Yeah. So if you're going to try to alleviate the commuting burden for people who live in Throgs Neck or in that part of the Bronx, um, because they don't have a car, so they take mass transit, you're not helping them. It's very ironic because further south over at Classen Point, they have no parking. So it's the opposite problem. Anyway, so what is Bally's entering into the fray here, so to speak, and trying to help solve this?
Yeah, so there was already a local effort to create some sort of shuttle that could bring people to the park to get to the ferry landing. Bob Jean from the Throgs Neck Bid has really been pushing for this. And he had a committee of people who were looking into ways to find funding for some sort of shuttle. And then Bally's came along and they were talking to community leaders about their casino idea. And Bally's also had concerns about how can we improve transit here. And so they kind of teamed up and took the local effort of community leaders, kind of saying to Bally's, well, what are you going to do to help the community? And
They
Bally's,
want they wanted to make friends, and considering the amount of money that had resource that they have available, providing a bus, providing some transportation is just a couple of pennies. That's the way I look at it, comparatively. And then they buy the love of the community.
yeah, it's kind of like a win-win because it's helping the community, but also kind of gaining some friends, like you said, and improving access to their golf course and potentially casino. So
Potentially, right.
basically, Bally's is funding a shuttle bus, a free shuttle bus, that will be connecting various East Bronx stops with the entrance to the park, which you take to get to the ferry landing.
Right.
That's kind of a whole nother thing that once you get into the park, you have
You
to walk.
you still gotta walk or get some, believe me, I know that. So where is it? Is it gonna be, like, on East Tremont? I mean, where is it gonna, and that's really a nice thing.
Yeah, so there are 10 stops right now, and they're talking about how that
Wow.
might expand. And so there's various stops along East Tremont. It goes to the Westchester Square subway station, and then a couple along the Parkway. And like right near where the Target and shopping center is.
Right.
And it's going to be a loop that lasts about 30 minutes, and it's free, and anyone can get
There
on.
you go. I think it's great. I do have just, automatically my concerns are about insurance and about issues that could come up. And into that is your next article, which you have reported that Senator Fernandez would like this to be an MTA project. To me, that sounds much more city-like than having, we can have private, transportation all over the city if this were the case. So, do you think that's realistic? You think Bally's would be happy if the MTA would say, "All right, we'll put a bus line in
Well, I think the struggle right now is that the MTA doesn't really seem interested in doing this.
there?"
I've kind of
Of
asked
course,
them throughout time about it, and they just say they don't really have plans for this.
right.
But I think the senator's idea is that they're going to be collecting data during this because it is a pilot in terms of the shuttle. They're going to kind of see how many people are using it. And so the senator's hope is that they'll be able to use that data and go to the MTA, go to the state legislature and say,
And
people.
just like any other project, try to move it forward. We only have about a minute left, and I want to ask you a related question. There's probably no answers right now, but you well know the people on City Island are talking about a ferry stop up there. Have you heard anything? I mean, I've heard pros and cons. The pros obviously would make it accessible for the people there. On the other hand, it's at one end of the island, and if you're asking for people who want to, let's say, have dinner further down the island, you still got to deal with that, missing transportation. Any thoughts? Have you heard anything? Spoken to anybody? I mean, just curious.
Yeah, I read about this a while ago. There was a petition going around, and there's
Yes.
people who definitely have strong feelings for and against it. But the EDC told me they don't have plans to add another ferry stop right now. So it's kind of similar to the MTA idea where,
Right.
their opinions,
People, they
but
like the idea. Well, so now here's Gary's editorial. There should be a shuttle of some sort that goes from the Orchard Beach parking lot all the way up and back and forth in City Island. I believe they've had a trolley like that, but right now, with the way transportation is and the way it backs up on Mother's Day, that's Gary's answer. Okay, so now you know. Aliya, you're just great. Thank you so much for all the work you do at the Bronx Times. Thank Chris and all my friends over there. And this is fascinating stuff, and you're right on it, and we appreciate it.
thanks for having me. Always good to see you.
Always great. All right, we're going to take a short break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about this very interesting book written by somebody who is a very, very, very important Bronxite in Bronx history. So we'll do that in a moment. We'll be right back.
So much.
Fostering a pet for a friend or neighbor can keep families together. Learn more at petsandpeopletogether.org.
¿Qué color? Perfecto, mijo.
Gracias. Thank you.
What's wrong, mijo?
Donating to a pet's medical care is one of the many ways you can help families in your community. Pets and people belong together. Learn more at petsandpeopletogether.org.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. I'm excited. I'm always excited for our programs because we have, in a way, a legendary Bronxite. He doesn't like being called that, probably, because that's not what he's about. But everybody knows Harry DeRienzo. This was the book we covered a couple of years ago, and now there's a brand new book, Coming of Age in an Era of Political Apostasy. I'm not aware that there's another book with the title that uses the word apostasy, but we're unique in the Bronx. And there's my buddy Harry DeRienzo. Nice to see you, Harry. Always great to
Good to
have
see
you.
you too.
Just for people who don't know, I mean, this book was about the formation of Banana Kelly. Just background before we get into what this is about. What is Banana Kelly? This is for people who may not be as old as we are. What is Banana Kelly? What was created, and why does it survive into this difficult period of time in America?
Yeah, Banana Kelly is a community organization that started out in the 70s when that area of the city, the South Bronx, was burning, and we lost 70 to 80% of our population. When the private sector and the public sector was basically looking at an area in the South Bronx saying, we don't really care about the people, we don't care about the buildings, they're not important. We need people to move, and they started withdrawing services. Well, there were a lot of people that refused to move and decided that they were going to hold on to what they had and rebuild. And some of those people lived on a part of Kelly Street that was shaped like a curve. Therefore, it was called Banana Kelly, and that's how Banana Kelly got started, by taking over abandoned buildings and trying to preserve what was there and rebuild what was there. And I guess almost 48 years later, or whatever it is, they've developed thousands of units, basically preserved mostly thousands of units of housing. It's an organization that is, the residents have a role in the governance and a say in policy. We have a strong resident council and and
it works. Yeah. It's the kind of housing, affordable to the degree it can be, that we always hope and dream. This is the perfect segue and the perfect introduction to this book, because in this era, when our values, democratic values about housing, all the things that we believe in, and the people who created and lived in Banana Kelly believe in, are being challenged across the country. And the question that you have asked in this book is, how do you come of age in that era when the philosophies that you just talked about that created this wonderful thing are hard to grasp. So tell me about your approach, and what got your mind around being able to write a book like this.
Right. So this book's a little bit different. It's my fourth book, and the first two books are mostly about my experience with community development, mostly in the South Bronx, but also in the city as well. So the themes in the books are community, what a community means. It's not just a neighborhood. It's just not, community for many people means everything and nothing. To me, community is you need commonality. You need interdependence. If I suffer, you suffer. If you do well, I do well. And you need collective capacity, which is exercised through the local institution, like a Banana Kelly.
Sure.
These themes are themes that go through the first two books. Then in my third book, I talk about community, culture, and democracy, and how they frame human progress, the three of them together. But some of my writing I felt was maybe a little bit too didactic, or it
was technical. I mean, you wrote a technical thing. I just want to throw this out, because this is right in the introduction. The younger generation will bear the burdens of cumulative greed, alienation, isolation, inequality, marginalization, environmental degradation, and other acquired debilitating conditions not of their making. So this philosophy that created Banana Kelly is now challenged by some very fundamental things across the country. You created characters. There's a young woman named Lisa, who kind of rides through this, and you trace her education about how to deal with these things. Just talk to me about, how does a person get from the point where you were, where the people from Banana Kelly were, to a point of going through all the stuff I just mentioned, so that they can actually come of age healthfully, mentally in this era?
Well, just very quickly. So I wrote, this is a fiction book.
Yes.
A lot of it is based on fact, and then projecting to a future where the challenges are very much different from the challenges that our generation faced in the 60s and 70s. So now there's a new challenge, and our youth are going to have to, I guess, mature and undertake these challenges more quickly than they probably should have to. But, it's there. And I'm placing a lot of faith in this generation. And what does it mean? Well, you've got to, first of all, believe in yourself. You got to believe in collective capacity. You cannot do everything by yourself, but people working together, uniting together in a purpose can make a difference, can make change. You have to respect and understand history. A lot of this book has to do with history and how history informs our current, the legacy of what was there before and how we confront these challenges. In the book, I have a lot of things in there where, one of the characters, Christopher, asks about, we live in a democracy. So since we live in a democracy, the majority rules, right? And Lisa's response is, well, no. Basically, who rules are the people who take advantage of opportunity. A vested minority, a dedicated minority, a vested elite, and one crisis can cause autocracy. Look at Nazi Germany. Look at Russia. 23,000 communists were in Russia in 1917. The country had 100 million people almost. 23,000, with the right circumstances, the right opportunity, 23,000 communists were able to foment a civil war that resulted in the Soviet Union. It does not take a majority to foment revolutionary change. So we can have change for the better or change for the worse. So don't think that it can't happen here.
Well, I think that's very wise. And you mentioned, communism. Many people are very afraid that America is turning in that direction with the number of anti-Semitic acts, racism, taking books out of schools. And what I really appreciated in the book was her journey. Spoke to, Native Americans, to get a sense of it. And so what you do is you trace a young person's kind of going through this to try and sort it out. One thing that struck me was the dialogue about guns and the Second Amendment. People know the Second Amendment, but now it's being turned around to be used that, wow, everybody should be able to carry a gun,
right,
et cetera, et cetera. So just talk about that conflict and what it takes for a young person to get to the conclusions that you have already expressed to us here today.
Well, that Lisa came to, right?
Well, what Lisa?
There's a Latin expression that basically says, when the reason for a law changes, the law is no longer valid. So, the Second Amendment was passed when we had no state army.
Right.
And the white, I was going to say white militia. The militia was needed. It was a white militia, actually.
It was
needed, to stem aggression or to be available in case there was a war. Of course, white militia was also used to capture escaped slaves, and also to kill Native Americans. But there was a reason for there being a voluntary militia because we didn't have a standing army. Now we have a defense budget that's probably 10 times more, 10 times larger than everyone else's combined, and we have a very we don't need the militia anymore. So the Second Amendment is kind of passé. But you don't know this. Well, first of all, people will reject that conclusion. But her position was that if you know history and know where these things came from, what the genesis was, you can come to a conclusion
and get a better interpretation of where it's at. Listen, I don't want to run out of time, but you told me because it's a fictional story, but it's based on reality. And if you can give us, we got a couple of minutes, if you could explain. Just for example, what you took out of your experience at Banana Kelly, and you would use it in this in this book.
Sure. Then remind me. I want to make one more point about
go ahead.
People with substance. If you remind me of that, because I get off on tangents. So, the book is fictional, but there's some events. First of all, obviously, everything leading up to the January 6th insurrection was true, and the stories about masks and some of the meetings. Those are things that I experienced myself. But there's one story that as an example, Maria, who has roots in the South Bronx, and like Lisa, had a lot of exposure to her grandmother. It tells a story about her uncle Johnny. And that's based on, and he died in a fire on Intervale Avenue. And that's based on a true experience I had with one of Banana Kelly's workers, Johnny Rodriguez, who actually died in a fire on Intervale Avenue. And the story was that he and his cousins got together on Fridays and they stayed over at their aunt's house to have, food and drink and basically in music and get together, a family gathering. And there was an electrical fire during the night. And Johnny came out on the roof over the entrance to the front door. And he says, "Donde están mis primas? Where are my cousins?" And they said, "They're not here." Johnny went back into the building and never came out. He and 8 of his cousins died in that fire. And every time when I was writing the story, I started to tear up a little bit because this guy was like, he's salt to the earth. I mean, one of the hardest
Right.
work he had.
And also generous in his life, because he went in and he actually died trying to help others.
One more point I want to make about the book is that, in terms of hope, because there's a lot of warnings in the book, but some people in the book that are hardened and come off as racist, but the ones that are like that who have substance. There's a lot of people in there with just full of hot air and just spewing, what people,
Want to hear, yeah.
their biases and telling them what they want to hear, make them feel bad, spewing hatred. The people with substance are the people ultimately that Lisa and her group, the Circle, got to talk to and to pull away from the white nationalists because they found common cause.
And so we're going to run out of time, but so that's the bottom line: find common cause, and then use the lessons of history to move
and
ahead.
learn how to talk to one another and look at the human side.
I agree with you. I certainly agree with you. So here's the book, folks. Pick it up. Coming of Age in an Era of Political Apostasy.
There you go.
There you go. I'm trying very hard, but really, it's in a way a guideline for young people or for parents to work with their young people so that they can come of age in an appropriate way, in ways that hearken to the history of our borough. I mean, that's it. Harry DeRienzo, I'm going to tell you to keep going, but you can't stop. So it's not, that the 4 books, and I'm sure there's going to be a 5th. Thank you so much for your time this evening on the Bronx Buzz. And, we'll be here for book number 5, 6, 7, 8, as much as you want to do.
Thank you, Gary.
We'll see you around town. All right. I guess that does it. Thanks to Aliya from the Bronx Times, to our buddy Harry for all of his great work, of course, to helping to develop the Bronx and helping our young people do better. And that's it. And if the curtain don't fall, the creek don't rise. We'll see you next week. Good night.